The visual you see is from Brooklyn Federal Court in New York. Here, prosecutors arrived for a high-profile case. Rafael Caro-Quintero, the notorious Mexican drug lord and one of FBI's most wanted figures, was presented before the court in New York. Caro-Quintero, who is now in his 70s, has been wanted by the US for the murder of an American agent 40 years ago. Mexico has handed over 29 drug cartel figures to the United States. The move is considered to be one of the biggest extraditions in Mexico's history. But what prompted Mexico to hand over these drug cartel leaders to the United States? Hello and welcome to Connecting the Dots. I'm Unman Bhattacharya. Let's decode one of Mexico's biggest extraditions of the Narcos mafia.
El día de ayer, en coordinación.
In coordination, cooperation, respect for sovereignty, and international reciprocity with the government of the United States, it was agreed to transfer 29 drug lords required by the U.S. Department of Justice. Some of them had been wanted for 40 years and others for 11 years.
Desde hace 11 años.
These alleged drug cartel members were already being held in Mexican prisons. They were put on planes at an airport north of Mexico City and flown to 8 different cities in the United States. Right now, there is very little information about where they are being kept. They face charges ranging from racketeering and drug trafficking to murder, firearms offenses and money laundering.
The 29 people who were being held in 9 federal prisons and 2 local prisons had various investigations against them for high-impact crimes in the United States, such as organized crime, fentanyl trafficking, trafficking of other drugs, money laundering, homicide, arms trafficking to our country, kidnapping, among other crimes.
Secuestro, entre otros delitos.
The Mexican authorities said the transfers were done quickly because they suspect some judges might have tried to delay them. The government used a special law to make sure the suspects would not be set free by the courts.
The Security Cabinet has information that there was a risk that some of these targets requested by the US government would be released or continue to delay their extradition processes due to agreements with some judges that sought to favor them, as had been done on other occasions over many years.
Of these drug cartel members, some are aging narcos who ran international drug rings for decades, smuggling cocaine and heroin. Others are younger and have been sending large amounts of the deadly drug fentanyl into the US more recently. Caro-Quintero is one of the founding members of the Guadalajara Cartel, one of Latin America's most powerful drug cartels in the 1980s. It worked with infamous Colombian drug lord Pablo Escobar. Caro-Quintero was wanted in the US for his role in the murder of Drug Enforcement Administration or DEA agent Enrique Kiki Camarena in 1985. This was one of the most notorious killings in Mexico's drug wars. The story was featured in the Netflix series Narcos Mexico. Caro-Quintero was arrested, spent 28 years in a Mexican prison and was released in 2030. The US was angry about his release. But in 2022, he was caught again by the Mexican Navy after a dog found him hiding in bushes. Now, after his extradition, he denied drug trafficking charges in the US court. Among the fugitives extradited to the US are the notorious Trevino brothers, Miguel and Omar, founders of the brutal Los Zetas cartel. They are known for their ruthless tactics, including dissolving rivals in acid. Miguel, also known as Z40, was arrested in Mexico in 2013 on charges like organized crime, drug trafficking, and money laundering. His brother Omar, or Z42, was arrested in 2015 on similar charges. The US alleges they continued to run their cartel from behind bars. The United States blames two Mexican cartels, Jalisco New Generation and Sinaloa, for bringing the deadly drug fentanyl into the US. Now Mexico has handed over Jalisco's leader, Antonio Oseguera Cervantes, to the US. He is the brother of a notorious drug lord known as El Mencho, who has a $15 million bounty on his head. Another suspect, Jose Angel El Guerrito Cannabio, linked to the Sinaloa cartel, was also extradited to the US. So why did Mexico suddenly hand over these alleged criminals to the US? They have been wanted for years. The answer lies in trade. Trump announced 25% tariffs on goods imported from Mexico and Canada. The tariffs, set to take effect on the 4th of March, are partly a response to Mexico and Canada's failure to stop fentanyl and other street drugs from entering the US. Trump's move is also linked to his executive order designating international drug cartels as terrorist organizations, signed on his inauguration day, the 20th of January. Mexico's new president, Claudia Sheinbaum, has taken a tougher stance on the cartels. In recent months, a wave of arrests, drug seizures and lab busts has hit the powerful Sinaloa cartel, forcing its leaders to scale back fentanyl production. Some labs have been shut down, while others have relocated to different parts of the country. To ramp up enforcement, Sheinbaum deployed 10,000 National Guard troops to the border and hundreds of soldiers to Sinaloa, a key fentanyl hub. In just 5 months, authorities seized nearly as much fentanyl as in the entire previous year, making close to 900 arrests in Sinaloa alone. Meanwhile, the United States has expanded drone surveillance over Mexico to detect drug labs. Despite the pressure, the cartels are adapting. They are investing in advanced technology to detect US drones, importing scanners, and hiring experts in drone operations and tracking. Mexico's latest crackdown on the cartels is making headlines. But is it enough to stop the flow of drugs? History shows that cartels adapt, relocate, and resurface. While high-profile extraditions and military crackdowns send a strong message, the battle is far from over. With billions at stake and a deep web of corruption, will this be a turning point or just another chapter in the war on drugs? Only time will tell.
I'm talking about the kind of diplomacy that's going to end the destruction of your country.
Yes, but if you
Mr. President, with respect, I think it's disrespectful for you to come into the Oval Office and try to litigate this in front of the American media. Right now, you guys are going around and forcing conscripts to the front lines because you have manpower problems. You should be thanking the President for trying to bring an end to this conflict.
That's U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance giving a dressing down to Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy at the Oval Office in the White House last week. And then all hell broke loose with this no-holds-barred showdown in front of the cameras.
Have you said thank you once this
A lot
entire
of
meeting?
times.
No, in this
Even
entire meeting,
today.
have you said thank
Even
you?
today.
You went to Pennsylvania and campaigned for the opposition in October. Offer some words of appreciation for the United States of America and the President who's trying to save your country.
Please, you think that if you will speak very loudly about the war, you
He's
can...
not speaking loudly. He's not
Yeah.
speaking loudly. Your country is
Can I-
in big
can-
trouble.
can I
Wait a
answer?
minute. No.
Can
You've
I
done a lot
answer?
of talking. Your country is in big trouble.
I know.
You're not
I
winning.
know.
You're not winning this.
I...
You have a damn
We-
good chance of
we are
coming out
staying,
okay because of
Mr.
us.
President, we are staying in our country, staying strong from the very beginning of the war. We've been alone, and we are thankful. I said thanks
You haven't
in
been
this
alone.
cabinet,
You
and
haven't
not
been
only
alone.
in this cabinet.
We gave you, through
I
this
said thank
stupid
you.
president, $350 billion.
You voted
we gave
for
you
your
military
president.
equipment,
You
and you
voted
men
for
are
your
brave,
president.
but they had to use our military.
Yes. What about West
if
people?
you didn't have
You
our
invited
military
me-
equipment,
you invited
if
me
you
to
didn't
speak.
have our military equipment, this war would have been over in 2 weeks.
In 3 days, I heard it from Putin. In 3 days. This is something
Maybe
new.
less.
In 2 weeks, of course, yes.
It's going to be a very hard thing to do business like this, I
Again,
tell
you
you.
just say thank you.
I said a lot of times thank you to American people.
Except that there are disagreements, and let's go litigate those disagreements rather than trying to fight it out in the American media when you're wrong. We know that you're wrong.
So it was Vance who took the lead in attacking Zelenskyy. Before Vance took aim at Zelenskyy, the press conference had been cordial. Trump was uncharacteristically restrained, even though Zelenskyy had at times spoken over him or answered questions before he could finish. So is J.D. Vance taking center stage as the lead political attacker for Donald Trump, and why? There is every indication that is indeed the case. A public disagreement with a visiting head of state initiated by U.S. Vice President is quite unusual. If we go by convention, then the job of an American Vice President is viewed as first helping the party's presidential nominee get elected and then be a low-profile figure in the U.S. government sitting quietly at their boss's side. Vance is anything but a self-effacing political understudy. So his conduct is quite different from that of his predecessors. The contrast with Trump's first vice president, the mild-mannered Mike Pence, is hard to miss. So Vance seems to have taken up the role of a political fighter for Trump as he goes even further than the president in his outspoken criticism of the Trump administration's foes. Many victims of his tongue-lashing are America's allies. Listen to this.
The threat that I worry the most about vis-a-vis Europe is not Russia, it's not China, it's not any other external actor. And what I worry about is the threat from within, the retreat of Europe from some of its most fundamental values, values shared with the United States of America. In Britain and across Europe, free speech, I fear, is in retreat. In Washington, there is a new sheriff in town. And under Donald Trump's leadership, we may disagree with your views, but we will fight to defend your right to offer it in the public square, agree or disagree. And trust me, I say this with all humor, if American democracy can survive 10 years of Greta Thunberg scolding, you guys can survive a few months of Elon Musk. But what no democracy, American, German, or European, will survive is telling millions of voters that their thoughts and concerns, their aspirations, their pleas for relief are invalid or unworthy of even being considered.
You heard Vance's ideological assault on European leaders at the Munich Security Conference. Vance took them on democratic backsliding, restrictions on free speech, and uncontrolled immigration. This was not the usual argument that Europe should do more to pay for its own defense and security. On that, he made just a passing reference. As far as his reference to tech billionaire and Trump advisor Elon Musk is concerned, Vance was speaking in the context of the backlash in Europe on Musk championing the rise of the right-wing party Alternative for Democracy in Germany and also demanding UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer's resignation over the Pakistani rape gang scandal. The audience of politicians, generals and diplomats at the conference was stunned. Many of the global elite were shaken to the core. The chairman of the conference broke down while delivering the closing remarks of the event as he reflected on the impact of Vance's words that the organizers of the conference had banned lawmakers representing populist parties on both the left and the right from participating in these conversations.
With Ewald von Kleist, this conference started as a transatlantic conference. After the speech of Vice President Vance on Friday, we have to fear that our common value base is not that common anymore. I'm very grateful to all those European politicians that spoke out and reaffirmed the values and principles that they are defending. No one did this better than President Zelenskyy. Let me conclude, and this becomes difficult.
Vance's speech triggered a backlash from European leaders. the German Chancellor pushed back.
That's why we will not accept outsiders intervening in our democracy, in our elections, in the democratic formation of opinion in favor of this party. You can't do that, especially not between friends and allies. We firmly reject this. We will decide for ourselves what happens to our democracy.
While critics questioned the merits of Vance's arguments, and some argued that his speech catered to his domestic constituency, Italy's Meloni came out in Vance's support.
Vice President Vance was discussing something deeper: identity, democracy, freedom of speech. In short, Europe's historic role and mission. Many pretended to be outraged, calling for European pride against an American daring to lecture us. But let me tell you, as someone who is proud to be European, first, if those who were outraged had shown the same pride when Europe lost its strategic autonomy, tying its economy to autocratic regimes, or when European borders and our way of life were threatened by mass illegal migration, now we would live in a stronger Europe.
In Washington, D.C., Trump agreed with Vance's remarks.
Well, I heard his speech, and I tell you, you're talking about JD's speech, right?
Yes, sir.
I heard his speech, and he talked about freedom of speech, and I think it's true in Europe. They're losing their wonderful right of freedom of speech. I see it. I mean, I thought he made a very good speech, actually, a very brilliant speech. Yeah, Europe has to be careful. And he talked about immigration. And Europe has a big immigration problem. Just take a look at what's happened with crime. Take a look at what's happening in various parts of Europe. I thought his speech was very well received, actually. I've heard very good remarks.
So why did Vance's speech ruffle so many feathers in Europe? Because Vance had the temerity to articulate a view that few dare to voice publicly about democratic backsliding in the heart of Europe. While Europe's political establishment is unrestrained in criticizing the state of democracy, pluralism and liberalism in the rest of the world, like this European Parliament resolution of 2023 on the situation in Manipur in India, it resents being at the receiving end of similar scrutiny and commentary. Now see this.
In his remarks at the Munich Security Conference, Vice President Vance condemned free speech violations in the UK, particularly. Could you respond? What is your message?
I have an idea. We have the man right here. Come on. Let's go, JD. We're putting you on stage.
Great. Look, I said what I said, which is that we do have, of course, a special relationship with our friends in the UK and also with some of our European allies. But we also know that there have been infringements on free speech that actually affect not just the British. Of course, what the British do in their own country is up to them, but also affect American technology companies and by extension American citizens. So that is something that we'll talk about today at lunch.
We've had free speech for a very, very long time in the United Kingdom, and it will last for a very, very long time. Well, no, I mean, certainly we wouldn't want to reach across US citizens, and we don't, and that's absolutely right. But in relation to free speech in the UK, I'm very proud of our history there.
That was J.D. Vance having a go at British Prime Minister Keir Starmer before the Trump-Zelenskyy showdown at the Oval Office. As far as Europe's double standards are concerned, India's External Affairs Minister, Dr. S. Jaishankar, has been calling them out.
How do you then sit back and define Indian foreign policy at this point where the West seems to be quite vociferous in trying to curtail funding for the war in Ukraine, whereas by purchasing this oil for national interest, India is being asked, are you funding this war?
So, look, I don't want to sound argumentative, but then tell me if buying Russian gas is not funding the war? I mean, why is it's only Indian money and oil coming to India which funds, but it's not gas coming to Europe which funds? I mean, look, somewhere, let's be a little even-handed out here.
Going back to what Vance said at Munich, his speech offers refreshing perspectives. Instead of a transatlantic club of mutual admiration with the rest of the world excluded from the party, something more interesting could be in the offing. This is not a US that is trying to destroy Europe or NATO, but a mature power that recognizes both the worth and limitations of the transatlantic partnership. If the EU opens up to some self-reflection, which it often demands from the global south, it could build a more honest and lasting transatlantic alliance that also welcomes other like-minded partners such as India. Then there are those who ask if JD Vance is sharing the load with Elon Musk to punish President Trump's opponents at Trump's behest, or if he is sketching out a role that will form the basis of his presidential campaign 3 years from now when Trump won't be eligible to stand again, or if he is doing both. Regardless of the answer, one thing is clear. JD Vance is no pushover or mere appendage to Donald Trump and has pitched perspectives that deserve attention. That's all in this edition of Connecting the Dots. We'll see you in the next episode with more raging issues. Until then, it's a goodbye from all of us in the Delhi newsroom. This is Munwan Bhattacharya signing off. Take care and stay safe.